Before we get started, I want to ask, before we jump into this spaghetti bowl, who in the last 24 hours, maybe week, has grabbed a glass of water from your faucet? Awesome. Okay, like maybe even today, right? It's really nice to be able to do that. There are 30% at least of people living on the Navajo reservation who can't do that, who don't have access to clean running water. It was promised to them 100 years ago when they were given this reservation, and they are still waiting to have it quantified. We could spend probably a week on this map. So first I just want to show you, we have a couple areas where you see, like, as he was saying, there's some homophily. You see a lot of Navajo together, and then a lot of Arizona and federal government together as well. There's communication, but it's not collaborative the way that we want it to. There are a lot of people working on this conflict, so to get sort of those immediate needs met, so I wanted to take a little bit of a broader view. So if you guys want to talk about this map sometime, I'm happy to, but I think we're going to move on just in the interest of time. Before I move on, though, I just want to say you can see that it's like structurally really multi-clustered, largely decentralized, which makes the design of intervention just a little bit complicated, but really exciting. Our next conversation is the research question that I developed. It was hard to find the right question, but I just kept trying to ask what's interesting. How do historical context and epistemological frameworks shape the power dynamics between Navajo Nation and the state of Arizona in managing and allocating water rights? And then I have a few smaller guiding questions trying to help me stay focused, because there is so much interesting information in this conflict. I wanted to make sure that I was staying on track, thinking about how do these historical treaties play a role, how do power imbalances and how do the relationships toward water affect this, as well as like our recognition of different types of knowledge. The themes and theories that I wanted to look at vary between power and environmental interdependence, resource paucity and profusion, and objectivity. Two that I'm going to focus on now are the concept of using Hojo philosophy. That's a Navajo concept that highlights balance, harmony, and the interconnectedness of everything. It's sort of, I thought, a good case to use this sort of instead of what I might use like Arne Nass's deep ecology theory. It also, I think, for me, affirms the Navajo Nation's epistemological sovereignty and their right to define the terms of this conflict. Also, I thought Donna Haraway's theory of situated knowledge was really important when we're talking about objectivity, right? Who is truly objective? Who decides what the truth is? I think it's an important question when we're looking at conflicts like this. I used a few different models, conflict analysis tools, but the one that I found most exciting was the Lute model. I think because, you know, as Barnett Pierce liked to say, we live in communication. Stories make us who we are. And instead of going into every single possibility for each category, I wanted to share a few snippets of these stories. So in Stories Lived, speaking of a clean water initiative, Jim Bissonette of Rotary International said, "It's kind of a shock when you think that people in the US don't have running water. We're going to change the lives of this family dramatically from the water that they were carrying in pickle jars to their house actually having running water." And then untold stories people don't get to tell enough. Crystal Tully Cordova, principal hydrologist in the Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources, who grew up hauling water, she says, "I am of the Bitter Water clan, born for the Tango People clan. My maternal grandfather's clan is the yucca fruit strung on a line, and my paternal grandmother's clan is the water that flows together. Our identity as Dina people is really interwoven with the natural world." Dina is what the Navajo call themselves. It means the people. So for unheard stories, Tully Cordova also says, although our ancestors didn't write things down on paper, they had this management practice that was just part of their way of living, and that was important for us. I come from a place where we've been here for millennia, and sustainability is a part of the knowledge that we grow up with. when we talk about unknown stories, those are the stories that I think personally for me while I'm doing my research, the relationships that are inside between government agencies that are much harder to get my hands on from the outside. And then untellable stories, right? Stories that America has been trying to avoid for a long time. When we talk about the genocide of the Native Americans, one quote that I thought summed that up was from a book by Albert Veeder. Seize and take from the Indian people by whatever means their life-sustaining winter's doctrine rights to water, and you take from them the basis for their continued existence as a separate and distinct people. And then when we come to stories told, we've all heard the adage, right? History is written by the victors. I think for those of us in conflict resolution, that means the questions that we ask ourselves are all the more essential to avoid perpetuating harm. And then storytelling, right? These are the stories that we're told as children, that we tell our children. These are what make us who we are. So the first intervention that sort of takes us right into the first intervention, which I'm going to speed through. It's a summer program between non-Indigenous and Indigenous youth to cultivate stewardship knowledge and skills. It empowers future generations, sort of looking towards that sustainability. Uses workshops, field activities, and storytelling, and it's rooted in an appreciative inquiry methodology. So looking together at what's working in our community, what is serving our community, how can we feed that? How can we work together to make that work? And this, for me, I think is important because it leverages young adults' natural inclination toward peer relationships to foster cross-cultural understanding, collaboration, and expanding their networks. And they get to co-create meaning through joyful experiences. I think joy is a really important part that can be left out of conflict. I think it's a great way to build new meaning together. And I think I especially like that this is sort of rooted in the 6 freedoms, the 6 Navajo freedoms: to be known in relationship, to be heard, to dream in community, to choose to contribute, to act with support, and to be positive. Now the next one is a little higher level. So this is using strategic visioning to gather different stakeholders who have shared interests, right? Like developing and pursuing conservation policy. So Indigenous tribes of the Colorado River, environmental justice advocates like We Act here in New York, and conservation groups all around the world. We gather them together 3 months apart, each 2 weekends, to talk about and use the steps of the strategic visioning to align their interests and develop strategies, identify their priorities, and create actionable solutions, with the ultimate goal being delivering a proposal to Camille Toussaint, who is the commissioner in the Bureau of Reclamation, ahead of the 2026 renegotiations of the Colorado River allocations. That, I think, meets the needs of the Navajo for contribution and cooperation. Ideally, we would see some change from that, but I think this one has the greatest risk of unintended consequences, because I think it would get the most attention. And then finally, this is the Hojo Haja Agricultural Resilience Forum. It gathers Indigenous communities who are often residing in ecologically sensitive regions and are at the forefront of the climate crisis, because they're uniquely positioned to identify its challenges, and they have developed already over millennia climate-smart agriculture. How do we make sure that as this continues, they are more able to get paid for that knowledge? We don't want one more thing taken from them without being compensated fairly. And I think one of the things that this forum does is address the isolation that colonization has caused, right, by separating each tribe and not encouraging them to work together to cultivate that power. So this, I think, similarly to the one before, cultivates new networks, creates greater possibility for power and social capital, as well as positioning the Navajo as the brokers. I'm going to just run through networking and sustainability because I have 7 seconds. Right. So a lot of the goals here are reducing homophily, right? Getting people together to talk, to share experiences, to create new stories, creating new networks, strengthening existing ones, addressing structural holes, like the gigantic ones between the Navajo and the government agencies. I think those are ones that need to be approached really gently and slowly. creating opportunities for the Navajo to act as brokers, like I said, and building social capital through collective empowerment. Finally, I just want to share one update, one really wonderful thing that's happened since the end of my data collection. The Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Agreement has ended, and Senator Mark Kelly has introduced it into Congress with co-sponsor Kristen Sinema. This QR code will take you to the website where you can track it. You can get a hold of your representatives and let them know, I support this, I want this to go through. Especially with the changes we're facing, I think it would be really amazing if we could show up for this bill. It would allocate almost all of the upper basin water rights that Arizona gets to the Navajo, as it should have done many, many years ago. There's so much more I want to say about this conflict, but if you want to talk about it, let me know. I'm happy to, but thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you all being here.
Thanks so much, Katie. So I'm actually going to start off with the first question, and then we'll see if we have time for others, which is, I think this is kind of in relation to your third intervention. And I just invite you to speak about the links between this particular conflict you were looking at and broader climate struggles that we're all facing, and how potentially some of your ideas to transform this conflict might actually relate to broader climate struggles that are affecting all of us.
Yeah, thank you. So I think because the Navajo, especially, they're living in an area that's facing extraordinary aridification. Also, shout out to Arizona for selling a whole lot of its water to foreign companies who are building extremely deep wells and taking water at extraordinary rates, making the local wells for people who are using it for personal reasons, like agriculture and their own livestock, really impossible to use. That, I think, contributes to the aridification. Also, we're facing climate change. This is getting worse all over the world, and I think as we have these communities who are developing ways and using their own ancient knowledge to face them and to address it, this is going to be really valuable information for the rest of the world. How do we make sure that we don't, once again, take that from them without giving anything back? Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let me just ask quickly, we have time I think, for one more question if online, if one of the Capstone teachers has a question. You're good. All right. Thank you so much, Katie.